What's up, YouTube? HPJ here, and I'm giving you guys another revamp redo of my Pendulum decks. And the Pendulum Magicians are up next. So this might be a weird, strange variation because I don't exactly remember my deck list off the top of my head. I did try to look through my videos, but my videos were just so crazy that that's why I'm redoing a lot of them. Is because during the period of time, my recording was bad. My like location was just god awful. Ugh. And I know a lot of you guys want better quality and better sound of those videos, especially considering the fact that it was the Pendulum era, and that was where I was mainly competitive for a while because I was playing something that was so easy to access in the competitive scene. So a lot of people were able to pick up those cards, play those cards, and just really get through a lot of that era. So, without further ado, I want to go back to Pendulum Magician. So, it's a very strange version of Pendulum Magician because of the amount of cards that I have from that era, and I also think a lot of cards were not reprinted yet. So, I'm just at least trying to fit with the time period as well as the reprint period and stuff like that. So, I'll go straight to the monsters. All the magicians I'm using 3 copies of Dragon Pulse Magician and Dragon Pit Magician. Then next to that, I'm running 2 copies of Zenki Magician, 2 copies of Oath Dragon Magician, 2 copies of Wisdom Eye Magician, and 2 copies of Noble Dragon Magician. I'll explain all my reasons for which, um, like I normally do with the rest of the deck profiles. Following that is a full set of Skullcrobat Joker, because it wouldn't be a Pendulum deck without Skullcrobat Joker. 2 copies of Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, 2 copies of Arch Phoenix Centric, and a copy of Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer. So that is the Pendulum part of the deck. For the non-Pendulum monsters, I'm running 3 copies of Mist Valley Apex Avian, 2 copies of Max C, and 2 copies of Effect Veiler. That is the monsters. For the spells, 3 copies of Pendulum Call, 3 copies of Wavering Eyes, 1 copy of Foolish Burial, Dark Hole, and Rikeki. So that is the spells. And then for the traps, pretty much a copy of Solemn Warning and a copy of Vanity's Emptiness, which did stay around a lot longer than a lot of people thought it would. For the extra deck, it's 1 copy of Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon, 1 copy of Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, 1 copy of Vortex Dragon, 2 copies of Ignister Providence, the Blasting Draco Slayer, 1 copy of Dino Power, 1 copy of Majestic Paladin, and 1 copy of Forming Piece Magician. So that is pretty much the Odd Eyes, the True King, the Odd Eyes, the Draco Slayer, and the Performance Engine that helped build this deck up. And I don't know if some of these cards were actually still out during that time, so bear with me. And then the rest of my extra deck was pretty much Black Rose Dragon, Stardust Dragon, Castel, Dagastel Emerald, Abyss Dweller, Cowboy, and 101 Silent Honor Arc. Alright, now let's go on to just the whole build of the deck. So, like I said, a lot of cards I just didn't have access to. You were pretty much building this from the structure deck, and the structure decks were really hard to find and very scarce to find because at that point, most people were probably at the point of if you have to buy them online, buy them online. And if they were online, they were probably expensive. So pretty much what made up your biggest scale in this deck is your Odd Eyes. Is your Dragon Pit and your Dragon Pulse Magician. Your Scale 1 and your Scale 8. Monsters who have unique abilities. They can discard Magician Pendulum cards from your Magician cards from your hand, while you had other Magician cards in your Pendulum Zone to either destroy a monster or destroy spells and traps. And this was really good in that sense of just dealing with problematic cards, dealing with things that you didn't want to, like the vanities, dealing with the anti-spell fragrance. I mean, if you could get over the anti-spell. Other than that, you pretty much had to rely on your massive summons, and you're pretty much decent to great um, touch with the extra deck. Zanky Magician pretty much was one of your big beaters. It negated light monster effects, I believe. Yes, light monster effects. And then if he battled a light monster, he would gain. Did he gain attack too? No, he always just negates the effects of a face-up light monster. I'm thinking of someone else then. But he was pretty much one of your big monsters that you'd summon. I don't think you ever used his Pendulum effect. I think for the most part you just used him because he was a 25 beater that came out through the Pendulum summon. Next is Elf Dragon Magician. The fact that I'm only running 2 was just due to limitations on my end. But Elf Dragon Magician allowed you to get a Magician card that was either in your Pendulum scale or in your graveyard and add it back to your hand, and then you could use the abilities, both his abilities during the same turn, so it wasn't too much of a problem. And it was always comboed here with Wisdom Ice Magician. Fun fact: when I got my Pendulum structure decks, I only got 2 Wisdom Eyes. I never had a chance to get the third, and by the time I did get to the second or third, they had already got hit. Or I was switching from this variation of Pendulum to Performer Power, Performer Mage, and going from there. And Noble Dragon Magician, for the most part, was just a tuner that can help you summon dragon monsters from your extra deck. And that's pretty much all I ever used her for. If I ever did use her for anything, it was just to pop herself, so that she could be Pendulum summoned and then just go off from there. Because I didn't really use any of the other Pendulum monsters. I tried to use a lot of the others that came out, but just the overall standing was these guys and then a couple of the bigger ones. But I never got to astrographing them by the time they came out. Performer Pal, Skullcrow Bat Joker. Love him. One of my favorites of the Performer Pals. I didn't really incorporate the Performer Pal engine till we got Performer Pal Magician, because Magician was pretty much the reason why a lot of the deck started spamming itself, and it was just able to do a lot of the bigger plays. Also, this card gives you access to pretty much all of your odd eyes and all of your pendulum like mechanic cards, with the exception of searching for itself, which is the only downside. But other than that, I mean, 18 attacker, level 4 dark spellcaster. What more could you ask for? Following him is the odd eyes. They could be easily bumped up to 3. They could easily be 2 of your biggest hitters, and it did help you search for a lot of your other pieces to get your pendulum stuff going. But this was around the time where most people were questioning which variation of pendulums they want to build. Did they want to continue to build Performer Pal Horror Mage? Did they want to build Performer Pal Magician? Did they want to build Odd Eyes Magician? Did they want to build Magic Spectre Magician? Like, there was so many different variations of pendulum that you could easily build at this point that it didn't matter which one, because all of them were topping and all of them were trying to find ways to deal with the others. So that is Odd Eyes Magician. That is Odd Eyes himself. The Archfiend's Eccentrics had more usage now than ever because the scale brightened itself to where she couldn't be normal summoned. She could be used as a pendulum scale and use her effect then. And then when she was special summoned, you can just Exile Force her and go crazy. Luster Pendulum. Like I said, I only have 1 Luster Pendulum. If I had multiple, like 2 more Luster Pendulums, it'd be a lot different build, because then I can rely on, like, if I had 1 more Odd Eyes, 1 more Wisdom Eyes Magician, 1 more, 1 more Wisdom Eyes Magician, 2 more Lesser Pendulum, you guys will see probably the full build of a Pendulum deck because of how many people use these cards and how many, how resourceful those cards became. It was ultimately the reason why a lot of them get limited, get banned, because of that situation. But do fear not that it was one of the best setups for entire format. Not one, but I think like 4 or 5 formats throughout the span of it till the ultimate demise of the Pendulum decks, till about couple of months ago, where the Pendulum stuff just really got to the point where they had to hit it tremendously in order for other decks to thrive. I'm not saying those other decks were good or, they were mindless to one point, but yeah, that's pretty much how it was. Um, let's talk about Miss Valley Apex Avian. This is where Apex Avian really started to shine. Um, where people thought Apex Avian was never going to be ever relevant again. Because of the magicians in the pendulum scale, this is pretty much what helped you get Apex Avian going. Tail, Magic Spectre, Unicorn. And Unicorn pretty much made Avian irrelevant. It wasn't until like they hit Unicorn and then people went back to Avion. But the overall sense was that it gave the biggest bird in, you know, the one deck no one thought was gonna ever see play after synchro format, some actual decent play. And I love my Apex Avians, but God, I had to sell out for these. I think it's like 15 each. I had to spend like $45 for a set. And that's saying a lot because of how much that my friend had to buy his for. And I ended up eventually getting his off of him. And Jesus, did we have to go through a whole lot to get a set of these birds. Oh my God, it's crazy. Yeah, that's me. That's an Apex Avian for you. Hand traps were hand traps. I don't know if Ghost Ogre was out yet, but I'm pretty sure she was. But I just didn't have the, like, literally I was limited on space to even put her in here, because I was still trying to remember decks and stuff from then. But if you could fit your Ghost Ogres in there, pretty much Maxi Valor Ghost Ogre. That's pretty much what it was. Till Ash Blossom came out. And the spells, Pendulum Call, one of your biggest assets, because it searches for your pendulum monsters. Then your scales can be destroyed till your next standby phase. So you had a ton of protection against the next card, which was Wavering Eyes, because this was pretty much the biggest card in Pendulums that everyone was using. It was supposed to be the counter to Pendulums, but actually turned out to just be one big Wavering Eyes war. And if you didn't Wavering Eyes, or Wavering Eyes, yeah, you didn't know how crazy it's gotten. It got there. It was crazy. Like, I even experienced it. Like, I Wavering Eyes, to Wavering Eyes, to Wavering Eyes, to having the huge revolution is over to deal with. It's crazy. I'm not gonna lie, it's crazy. And then the counter to this, it really didn't even working, because at that point people were running like variations of the next version of this deck, which I will do. And it really didn't matter about the Wavering Eyes at that point. Um, Regeki, Dark Hole, Foolish were just staples. The Foolish, for the most part, was just to get into your Noble Dragon Magician, so that way she could have plays in the graveyard, and then counterbalance the Regeki and Dark Hole was just the board wipe. If you could board wipe anything. Um, there were many traps being ran, but these were pretty much your big staples. I think this was at 2, if I'm not mistaken. I think both of these were at multiples. Till overall, it just eventually got hit. And both of these ended up getting banned. Okay, so that was pretty much the main deck, and then the extra was pretty much just fitting in the Odd Eyes engine in the form of the Odd Eyes monsters. Then you fit in the engine of the Draco Slayers, which I do eventually know that the list changed. I know my list changed once we got Master Pendulum to really fit into this, and then Luster Pendulum wasn't something till later on, which was the sad part. But you did get the full array of every bit of the Pendulum experience. You had your Odd Eye setup, um, your your Dragon Slayer setup, and you had your Mage setup before the emergency list hit every big part of it. And then you just had your staple extra deck cards, like you were having backup from Stardust and Black Rose because of the little nobleman, and then you had like Castell, Emerald, Dweller, because you were still dealing with construct in them, you were still dealing with Cosmo. You were still dealing with a lot of things. I think a lot of people also ended up citing in like system downs for Cosmo, fearing the Cosmo town, and then having to deal with Dark Destroyer as well. There's a lot of stuff that you had to deal with during um, the Pepe era, besides Pepe, because you still have to deal with Cosmo, you still have to deal, oh my god, there's so many things you have to play against. And then you have to be very cautious against, too. But that is pretty much it for this revisit, this revamp, redo for Magicians. And I'll have more coming to really fit in the fix ups for a lot of the stuff. Do not expect me, I'll just tell you guys now, I am not doing any current versions of these because I don't have the stuff for it. So you won't see like what is that card? Oh, Duelist Alliance. You won't see multiples of heroes and errors. But I just wanted to keep it as pretty standardly set up as possible. So thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe because it helps me out tremendously. And until next time, it's EJ signing out.